Hey, what's up guys? It's Alliteration Gaming here, back with a deck profile that you probably should have expected because it's been in almost every single recent fight video I've uploaded. I'm generally hard to make tanks work. So this is tanks. This is Decepticon Tanks. They're big, they're bulky, and they're pretty decent. I like this deck a lot. I've been trying to play this deck for a long time since the game came out. I finally kind of realized, as my friends were all playing blue decks, that blue is probably the way to go with this deck. And it's taken me pretty far, but ultimately, I don't know if this deck is really there yet, but we're going to go through it. We're going to talk about making it the best we can be. So starting off with the characters. We're going to start off with Megatron because he kind of like signals the theme of the deck. So he has 2 attack, 3 defense, and 12 health. At 10 stars, he's actually pretty probably the hardest to kill out of all of them. Even though he has less defense than Darkmount, that health pool goes a long way. So when you flip to his tank mode, you can scrap a card from your hand. If you do, you destroy enemy upgrade. Any upgrade. So this is just always readily available. Destroy whatever you want. This is really good because the theme of this deck is kind of grinding the game out through defense and control, and keeping your opponent's options limited by constantly keeping their upgrades down by flipping Megatron is really efficient, especially if you continue to draw the cards needed to consistently transform him in and out so that you can achieve that goal. So then in his bot mode, he just trades 1 defense for 1 attack, but then he acquires Pierce 3. So Pierce is one of the keywords in this game where you do this minimum amount of damage. So if you swing for 5 and they block for 4, you still do Pierce 3. If you swing for 5 and they block none, you still do 5. Pierce only takes effect if it needs to. It's a minimum damage, not a maximum. That's it. It's really simple. And that's kind of the theme of this deck. This deck does not play orange, and it plays a lot of Pierce cards because when Megatron's natural Pierce and the Pierce cards specifically for tanks that cater to it, that's kind of seems like the way to go. At least it screamed out to me for this deck, where you accept that you're not going to do much more than just packets of confirmed damage as you grind the game out. Seems like the best way that this deck can go right now with the options it has for it. So that's Megatron. He's like the workhorse of the deck. He will deal the most damage in the deck and keep the opponent's options down. He's really nice. He's really nice. The natural Pierce is a godsend, especially when you're not drawing your good cards and when you're fighting like, you know, heavy blue decks, which this deck is meant to specialize against. Next we're going to go over Demolisher, who is kind of like the he wants to be the engine of the deck, but he's not exactly there. So in his tank mode, he has 3 defense, 3 attack, and 7 health at 6 stars. He's a lot easier to kill than you'd think. This guy gets one shot like nearly all the time, to be quite honest, because he's just really easy to take out. He mostly just acts as a shield for the other tanks, and you're left with them, and then you try to go from there. So his tank mode effects, when you flip into this mode, you draw a card for each of your other tanks. So if they're in tank mode, both of them in tank mode, and you transform Demolisher into tank mode, you get to draw 2, which is really nice. When it goes off with all your other transforming cards, which we're going to get to soon, you will understand why this is really nice, but ultimately it's so hard to keep Demolisher alive, and Demolisher being like this draw power being the engine of the deck. I mean, I guess it is the engine, it's just not a very good one. Means that if you lose 1 tank, which isn't tough, your deck slows down a lot, which is kind of the core issue of the deck. So that's kind of what we try to take effect against in all the cards that we play through this deck. Then in bot mode, he has 0 attack and just gets 1 extra defense. And his ability is he flips battle cards equal to his defense. So he's flipping 6 by default, if, you know, because 4 defense plus 2 for the attack. If you have like Blast Shield on him, he'll be flipping all, you know, 6 cards, all that nonsense. But that's not particularly relevant because you don't play orange in this deck. Demolisher confused me about how to play tanks for a long time because it seemed like that you wanted to cater to orange and then just be like, oh, we'll have natural high defense, so I can just play all orange, right? But that doesn't work. It's not what the deck wants to do at all. None of the cards you want to play are orange pips. So his bot mode just kind of ends up being really weak, like abysmally weak. Like you do not ever attack with this guy in bot mode unless you're not dealing damage in any other way. Like if you're fighting like an all blue deck and you have no Pierce or something like that, you know you're not dealing damage anyway. Gets the cards to your scrap pile. The other portion of this is that it loads up the scrap pile with cards, which caters to Hunker Down. That's surprise. This is like the best card. This is why you play tanks, because of this card, which we'll get to in a second. So you'll understand why he kind of caters that a little bit, but ultimately it's not him filling the scrap pile with armors to Hunker Down grabs armors from the scrap pile. It's not that consistent, and I never really want to. I find myself occasionally believing in him and swinging and trying to fish for some armors, finding nothing, and then hating this card again. But if you want to play 3 white tanks, he has Necessary Evil. I've seen a lot of people say you could sub him out for Flame War. I've tried that deck. It's really not much better or worse. The extra tough one helps keep these a little longer, but Flame War still doesn't do like anything else otherwise but like exist. And that's kind of all I want Demolisher to do is exist and like soak up attacks too. So it's really the same thing. Then we're going to get to Darkmount. Darkmount is my favorite tank of the deck. I think Darkmount is probably one of the best character cards in the game. I think this card is really freaking strong. So in tank mode, he has 4 attack, 4 defense, and 9 health. Health is super, super low, but the 4 defense is huge. And when you flip to this mode, you can scrap a card from your hand. If you do, deal 2 damage to any enemy. So again, grind the game out, slow packets to confirm damage across turns as you go through your actions. The theme of the deck, and just that on-demand burn. Like the second anything gets with 2 or less health left, it's dead. Like it's absolutely dead. Then in bot mode, Darkmount is a dog, so he gets an extra attack but trades 1 defense. But he gets the ability when defending against ranged characters, he has +2. So this is really big. This is really, really big. Like a lot of very relevant characters are ranged. A lot of characters in general in the game are ranged. Like Optimus Prime Battlefield Legend coming at you for 8. Cool, that's a base 3 now. Slap some reinforced plating, a little bit of tough, a little bit of blue flips. We're at 10, 11 defense, having a good day. Darkmount's really, really nice, but if you can't find the armors for him, he just gets melted really easily. This is kind of, again, the main core of the deck. So I'm not trying to just go on about nothing but the flaws in this deck. We're pointing out the weak spots of these tanks is that when you get them all set up, they're extremely strong, but before you do that, they're very vulnerable. So as we go into the rest of the cards, we're going to kind of see how we attempt to get them armored up as fast as possible. So we're going to start with the actions. This is a blue combo deck with draw power in it, so we are, of course, playing a few copies of Brainstorm. Brainstorm is just, you may play an action, you may play another action. You should probably know this card by now if you're interested in the game whatsoever. Everyone likes this card. I think it's a little overrated. Sometimes this is very dead, but it's a little less dead because you have these 2 really good discard engines with Megatron and Darkmount, so you're actually not too worried about dead cards in this deck a lot of times, so you have a little liberty with what you want to play there. So I like Brainstorm a lot. Brainstorm makes big plays in this deck. A lot of times I've considered taking it out. Ultimately, I think it's not necessary in this deck. I think it can be a personal preference thing. I personally prefer it. So the next card we're going to get into is literally the best card in the deck. This is the only reason why tanks are worth playing. It's Hunker Down, which it's an action that says flip each character from bot mode to tank mode. So you're getting minimum 3 transforms. So you could be going draw 2, pitch 1, scrap and upgrade, pitch 1, burn 2. Good business, good business. That's a big rollout right there. Then for every tank that has no armor on it, put an armor on it from your scrap pile, which is really nice. Like we do play some really good armors. You start getting reinforced platings, force shields, blast shields loaded up onto the scrap pile, and then you can be this card is just a huge swing sometimes. Like this card can potentially be like a +4 or +5 in terms of raw card value. And then that's just in raw card value. Like as far as long-term game value, it can be insane. This is kind of the card that helps us find the armors really quickly. Like if we're not drawing them and we're flipping them, we're directly equipping them from the scrap pile. We're trying to get our dudes equipped to live as fast as possible because that's the goal of this deck. As long as you live, eventually you'll win. Ideally, anyway. So living is hard. This card helps us live more and helps us combo off with all of our really, really strong transform effects. This deck kind of lives and dies by its transform effects, which plays in our next card we're playing 3 copies of, which is Rollout. Rollout says flip each of our characters from bot mode to alt mode. So it's basically just the first half of Hunker Down. Really, really nice. It lets you do the football 3, draw 2, pitch 1, burn 2, pitch 1, scrap and upgrade, the good stuffs combo. It's really, really nice. Having the extra copies of Hunker Down basically in the deck is super handy. Obviously, it's not grabbing armors, but it is drawing us cards, which is always good, as long as Demolisher is alive. Again, as you can see, these 2 cards, combined with Demolisher and the transforming abilities in general, it's the engine of the deck. So again, once you lose one, it's because if they kill Demolisher, which isn't a tough thing to do if you can't get armor on him really fast, If you kill Demolisher, the deck has no draw power. So all these double transforms to do all these pitching to scrap things and burn things isn't as good anymore because you have to think really hard about if you want to do them even or not because you have no hand. But then if they take out either one of these, then Demolisher's only drawing one, and then you'll have one discard outlet. So, I mean, it makes decision making easier, but you're also getting substantially less value at that point. So again, we're trying to keep the tanks alive. Next card we're playing copies of is 3 copies of the Bigger They Are. Super underrated card. This card says your character gets +2 attack. Then, if it attacks an enemy that has more stars than it gets Pierce 4. Pierce 4 is a really big number. It's a big number on like defensive decks. It's really nice. Which again, this deck caters against that, so it helps. Pierce is in the theme of this deck. A lot of times, like, so Megatron, which you have to understand about attacking with the tanks. Megatron will always deal damage when you want him to. Darkmount won't always, but as long as you put something on him, he's pretty good. Demolisher absolutely needs something on him to do literally anything. 3 attack with no orange pips is not going anywhere. So you need some piercing on him. You need some upgrades. You need something, or you need this on him. This turns Demolisher from a wet noodle into Pierce 4, which is like insanely good. So it's just a really good card. You want this. You absolutely want this card. It's very critical. Trying to use all your draw power, drawing 2 multiple copies of it to take down defensive decks and their big guys really fast. You know, double primes, any Nemesis decks, any Optimus decks, stuff like that. Really important card. Next, we're playing a substantially less important card. It's 3 copies of Security Checkpoint. This card says both players reveal their hands and scrap all upgrades. Because of this card, and because your tanks need weapons just to be able to really do any damage, this deck plays a lot of upgrades, like a lot of them. So ultimately, this is almost always going to be a minus for you. You never really want to play this card. It's basically just in here for the double blues because, again, we need to live. We don't have any natural tough. We don't have things like that. We need to be flipping a lot of blues to keep the tanks alive. Very important. So it's only in there because of that. Next, we have a few 2-ofs. We have 2 copies of Plasma Burst. This is just simply a no pip, deal 2 damage to an enemy. This card is just really nice for a lot of situations, like where if you have it in hand, basically the whole Darkmount situation where, if they're at 4 or less health, flip, double burn, you know, you can take down a lot of things. It extends the reach on a lot of your burn damage. When you start packing all your pierce, like, say something has 7, you're down at 7 health, well, I guess I'll, flip Darkmount and Megatron both, burn, I'll like say they're both in bot mode, I'll use rollout, I'll use hunker down, I'll flip them both, I'll burn 2, I'll flip Megatron back, I'll Plasma Burst, and I'll Pierce 3. It's it's that confirmed damage. You gotta get that confirmed damage out there. For a long time, I religiously played this as a 3-of because I think its reach is actually one of the best parts about this deck. It might find its way back to him. It's really just in here as a 2-of because I think it being any more or less is a personal preference thing because that no icon is killer. When you're only getting 2 flips naturally, without any reinforced plating or stuff like that, because we're not playing Flame War, we're getting 2 flips naturally. We need one of them to not be this, because it means there are times we can defend for 1, which even with our high defenses, defending for 4 or 5, like, Demolisher's only got 7 health, Darkmount's only got 9 health, like, that goes really fast, especially when you start putting your enemy's burn into the equation, too. So, I don't really like that it doesn't have pips, but I think the reach is important. I think it has to be in the deck in some quantities. I tried without it completely. Like, all the games I've uploaded is very, wildly different variations. Some of them had 3 of these, some of them had none of these, like... So I've tried it both ways, and either way, I think a good middle ground is at least that, so you can go off of from there. Next, we have 2 copies of Rapid Conversion. This is just flip one of your characters to its other mode, the mode that it's not in at the moment. This is just to extend our amount of transforming actions, because once again, this deck lives and dies by its transforming actions. A lot of times, like, this can just lead to some extra removal or some extra burn. It's usually a really expensive play to do something like that, because using 1 card to transform one of these leads you into either getting, like, 1 card back maybe, or like, well, if you get 2 Demolisher, it's a +1, which is like very mediocre for your action play, and then it's going to lead into just losing more cards just to do these effects. So it's an expensive play, but it does help. Sometimes, like, it gets Megatron back into the mode he wants to attack in, or Darkmount to the mode back he wants to defend in. I find it helps. Once again, the transforming is it's super critical in this deck. If you're not drawing transforming cards, you are not winning with this deck. You are not doing anything. Your deck is just so slow. The last one we have is 2 copies of Inspiring Leadership. This is draw 3 cards and then scrap 2 cards. We play a deck that is extremely reliant on seeing hunker down / rollout Ideally hunker down, but rollout's okay too. See, so we need to play some amount of draw power. Demolisher helps with the draw power, but the main thing about Demolisher is that his draw power comes in after you play these cards. Demolisher's draw power is a reward for playing these cards, so we can't really rely on Demolisher to help us see these. So we need other draw outlets. This also could be a 3 of, like, these 3 cards could all be 3 ofs. They're just kind of like the cards I'm not 100% sold on, so they're more 2 ofs. The scrapping cards from your hand is nice too, because like you can play Hunger Down next turn and then get armors that you scrapped. So there's kind of a nice interaction there. Same with like Megatron and Darkmount. I imagine that's why they scrap cards from your hand, is that you can then pick them up with Hunger Down is the idea with it. Sadly, the way Hunger Down works, you can't use Hunger Down, flip them, scrap cards for their effects, and then pick the cards you scrapped up, because you have to resolve Hunger Down before your flip effects. These cards would make a lot more sense, and I think this deck would actually be like leagues better if you could play Hunger Down that way. But I guess they were scared of tanks being too good, which is understandable. This deck, the thing about this deck is it's very like perfectly balanced. I've never felt like what I'm doing is unfair playing this deck. It's very, very balanced, which makes me look forward to it in the future. So that's all the actions we're playing. Next we're going to go on to weapons, starting off with the best weapon in here. 3 copies of Handheld Blaster. Bold 1, completely useless weapon, only played for double blue pip because we need to live. It's important to live. Otherwise, it's a dead draw. But once again, dead draw is not too relevant because we have these really, really nice discard outlets. Next is the actual best weapon of the deck is 3 copies of the Almighty Energon Axe. This card I think is perfectly overrated, or not perfectly overrated, but rated just enough. It's that good. It is, you can only put it on a damaged character. It gives +3 attack and Pierce 2. This card is super, super good. I would like to see this on any of my tanks. Turning Megatron into 7 attack with Pierce 5 is crazy good. Making making Darkmount 8 attack is like really big. Like he can actually start hitting things, like not relying on Pierce at that point, which is really nice. If you have like the crushing treads on him too, like that Pierce 6 combo is super strong. And then the majority, like the stipulation on them having to be damaged, like the goal of this deck is to take damage in very small portions. So it's really not hard to get the damage on these guys where you want them to be. Next is going to be 3 copies, yes, 3 of them, of the Fusion Cannon of Megatron. So this is a generic weapon that gives +1 attack, but then if it's on Megatron, he also gets Pierce 3. So this, you play it in this deck because this is the Megatron that the Fusion Cannon's good with. It's not good on the Living Weapon Megatron, unless you just draw like 3 of them like a god, and then you can play them all and be like, oh, Pierce 9, no, tight. But I mean, you could just be doing that with actual weapons because you're a living weapon. But this Megatron is good on him because in bot mode he has the Pierce 3. You put this on him, he's 5 attack with Pierce 6. So if you flip an orange pip, you get to do Pierce 6. Otherwise, you just do Pierce 5, which is still a really big number. It's really, really nice. Like this is the weapon I always want to see on Megatron. That's where like I try to avoid putting axes and stuff on him if I can, which usually you can because he's doing the natural Pierce 3. Like he's always doing work when he attacks, no matter what. Come back, Megatron. So like the Fusion Cannon's really good on him. It's not like always generically good. Like against aggro decks, like this weapon's basically pointless because it's +1 attack. Because again, Pierce doesn't matter. But you're playing this deck with the mindset that your Pierce matters and that you can outlive, which I think is really the. Again, it's worse against the aggro decks, kind of better against the blue decks, but I think it's still the only really way you can afford to play this deck right now. This deck doesn't have the cards catered to really play another way, at least not optimally. So I think you want to go all in on the Pierce business. So next, for the last card, we have 2 copies of Piercing Blaster. Play this at 3 for the longest time, trying out 2, could go back to 3, but it's literally just a white pip Pierce 3 weapon. That's it. Ideally, my idea with this is I want to stick it on Demolisher and then not have to worry about Demolisher for the rest of the game. He'll do his Pierce 3 and he'll die when my opponent wants him to die. That's kind of the best way to go about it. Investing into your characters too much is one of the easiest ways to flop playing this deck. You have to accept when your tanks are going to die because there's a lot of ways out there to kill them. So we play the Piercing Blaster. I don't think it's too terrible. I see a lot of people think this card's really bad. I meme about it a lot, but I do think it's actually a pretty decent card, depending on the context of the deck it's in. So that's all the weapons. Now for the armors, we're playing 6 armors. I wish I could play more because Hunker Down wants you to see him, and you need to see him for the tanks, but really, there's not a lot of good armors out there right now for you to play. We have Reinforced Plating. Reinforced Plating is the big dick armor. This is the one you want on literally all your guys if you can. Hunker Downing into 3 of these on all your tanks is the nut. Reinforced Plating just gives Tough 2, which is huge. Like, Tough 2 is huge. Like, Tough 2 can usually at worst result in 2 extra blues. At best, it can result in, like, I don't know, 6 extra blues. Like, if you like, once the whites and double blues come in, you're flipping like 4 or 5 cards. Like, things get crazy. This is what lets you get to like super stupid high defenses. This card's amazing. If I could play 9 copies of this card in my deck, I think I would, like, in an actual heartbeat. But after that, we kind of have some not so. I mean, so we have 2 copies of Force Field. Only 2 copies because in this deck. Okay, I guess I should explain Force Field. So Force Field is if the upgraded character would take 5 or more attack damage, you can scrap this card, and then the upgraded character takes 4 damage instead. So it reduces any big chunk of damage to 4 and then goes away. So it has synergy with Hunker Down because then you re-equip it. Kind of. I mean, only really one of your tanks can take 4 damage twice, unless you're just not playing Burn. But this card is kind of just in there for like the really aggro decks to not like one-shot your tanks. And you can like fish for it with Hunker Down, which is kind of nice. Otherwise, it's really not that great. This is an all blue deck because it has to be. So this is just kind of in there because like it's handy. And there's not a lot of better armors to play. And then after that, I'm literally just playing a 1 of Blast Shield. Blast Shield is just +2 defense, and then after the defending, after the defense, this card gets scrapped. So again, it's recurable with Hunker Down and whatnot. And the Marine, it's just really just a 1 of. I don't like seeing multiples of this card because like it's hard to get this card to matter because you just throw it on something, and the opponent waits till they just have like a weenie attack and then just throws it in and then just like wastes your Blast Shield essentially. I'm not really crazy fond of this card, but again, you kind of have to play it, and that's really it. Like, there's other armors you can play that we're going to kind of talk about, but I don't think any of them are particularly good. I think once there's better armors in the game, the tanks will be a lot better because not only will they be easier to defend because you have more than one armor that you really want to see on them. Hunker Down gets a lot better too because the more armors we get, you know, the better things there are to put. You can play more armors, then Hunker Down is better. The deck is better as a whole. But until then, I think this is kind of what we're working with. After that, I guess to round out utilities, we have 2 copies of Crushing Treads. I don't really like this card, but right, good start, right? So you can only put it on tanks, so you guys have to be in tank mode. The upgraded character has Pierce equal to its defense. This is kind of the other card that it's like, oh, I want to see it, put it on Demolisher, and then not worry about Demolisher for the rest of the game. It's not bad on Darkmount too, because if he has to sit in tank mode, he just got that chillin' Pierce 4, which is pretty tight. A pretty cool thing is, if you have this and this on one character, the upgraded character will have that much defense. Like, if you put it on, well, I guess it wouldn't do that if you put it on these, because you still need to get that much attack. But like, if you put it on like this and this with Energon Axe, he's gonna have 7 attack with Pierce 4, 5, 6, and then 8 from the axe. Like, you can do some cool combos with that, but most of the time this is just kind of like my backup just to make sure my guys are hitting. It's really good on some of the characters, not so good on some of the other characters. I don't want it on Megatron because once I find his fusion cannon, I'm hitting Pierce 6 anyway. Like, just a vanilla Megatron with treads on it, it just puts you from Pierce 3 to Pierce 5, but you only have 4 attacks, so you're probably just dealing Pierce 4 unless you flip an orange and you get to 5 attack. But this card's alright. Again, you kind of have to play it. These are the tank cards. You kind of have to play them because why are you running the deck any otherwise? Like, just play something else if you're not going to play the tank cards, the tank specific cards, and so you kind of want to try and cater to them. So as far as other things that we can play, first of all, for actions, there's a lot of other actions aside from like these. The numbers on these all being kind of variables. First of all, we're not playing any removal. So things like ramming speed and debilitating crystal, we're not playing them in this deck because we're not worried about armors because all of our damage is pierce damage for the most part. Getting rid of weapons is like pesky weapons that have pierce and things like that is handy to us. That's the only upgrades we really want to get rid of. But Megatron transforming usually takes care of that. Or just pop in pesky weapons, Megatron can take care of. Anything else, we're just not that worried about. So we're not playing anything like removal. It's not necessary in this deck. We're not playing static buffs, so things like Leap into Battle and anything else like it. We don't want to play those cards because they're giving us extra attack. That's not helping us because we're trying to play into Pierce anyway. Like, Megatron going from 4 attack to 7 attack is, like, not super relevant. Most of the time, because like we're probably playing for the Pierce 3 anyway. Again, that's the idea. It could be good, could be bad, but I think that's how you have to play the deck right now. I think this one is probably one of the more debatable cards that could be going to the deck because it is a blue pip, but this one mostly just came down to like not so much I don't want the attack buffs as much as I need all these other cards to make these characters work. Like these characters all need constant attention and upkeep by these actions, so you have to play all of them. I tried Equipment Enthusiast for a while. Just draw a card for each of your other upgrades. For each of your upgrades. Oh, it's not an upgrade. This card is kind of nice because like you hunger down. It's like all these armors. And then you can be like, oh, next turn I'll like draw 3. You know, assuming none of my guys died or anything. Like, I mean, it can make some big draw plays. But ultimately, like, it's a win more card. Like, if you're in a position that late in the game where you can use your action to just draw a bunch of cards, you're probably winning more, or you're going to draw a bunch of cards and then die because you didn't do anything else with your action. This card is really awkward to use, and ultimately I didn't find it very good. It was another one of those scenarios where, like, oh, well, it's draw power to help you find Hunger Down / Rollout, right? But, it draws based on upgrades, so it comes after Hunger Down and stuff. So again, it's one of the rewards for playing Hunger Down, which we're trying to minimize that and focus on actually finding these cards in the first place. So that card's value doesn't come until after we're already winning, essentially. Another card that I think is kind of weird in this deck, but I kind of liked it for a while, but I just had to take it out because the no pip was killing me, is Ready for Action. Just untapping one of your characters that has 10 stars or fewer. With all the Pierce you have, it essentially can kind of... This card essentially just says like, burn 3 or something like that. Because you're getting the extra attack. Another big value of this card is like controlling who takes damage. So that's kind of the idea behind this deck, right? Is like your tanks taking damage when you want them to. So like say I offer up like, Darkmount turn 1. They attack him for like some big dick stuff. He's low health now. I play Ready for Action, untap him, and then now Megatron's going to go in. So now Darkmount will chill here and just transform and play around for a while because he can't get attacked again. That's the real value of this card. I didn't test it as much as I think I would have liked to, so I think it's worth thinking about in the deck. But my main thing is it has to come out for Plasma Burst, so it's really just not that good. It's just not as optimal as it could be because of like the no pip. If this card had a blue pip, I'd be playing it in a heartbeat, but it's just not like that. As far as upgrades and things go, Armed Hovercraft is kind of tight in this deck. When you put on a ranged character, you can do 1 damage to each enemy. Main problem is the tanks kind of like, okay, they do want to do burn damage, but they really need the Pierce upgrades on them to be good. So sticking this on them isn't that good. I think if you play this, you have to play Swap Parts too and like commit to the meme of Swap Parts Armed Hovercraft, which I think could be good compared with like all the other burn damage in the deck, but ultimately I don't know how efficient that is really. It's more of a pipe dream thing. The only other armor I would consider playing this deck is Scrapper Gauntlets. It's a static +1 defense, and when you put it on a character, you can scrap an enemy weapon. So once again, you can take out those problematic weapons I was talking about. I played this as a 1-of for a long time. I think it could be still a 1-of. I just kind of took it out because like it was annoying me a lot. But like just finding it, tossing it into the scrap pile, then like, oh, there's a bad weapon on the field, hunker down into it, and then just pop it. Or like hunker down to get this with no weapon, and then you do Demolisher, and you draw 3 in total with this is, kind of nice. But the orange pip is really, really killer. I hate flipping this orange pip. Like, this is the only pure orange pip in the deck, and that's one of the reasons why I really don't like it either. But this card I think is a little more necessary, but I think you can play this card. I like this card. It just kind of came out here because I was tired of flipping orange, to be quite honest with you. After that, the last one I want to talk about is Databank. Databank I tried playing for a long time. Just at the start of your turn, draw a card. Seems ideal for what this deck wants to do, right? Grind the game out, draw cards, scrap the cards to do your effects, keep drawing your cards, and keep playing all your good cards to keep your characters rolling because your characters need good cards to roll. But this card is just, it's too slow for this deck. That sounds contradictory to everything I've told you so far, because this deck is slow, but like, you have to get armors on your characters immediately or they will die. But then you also have to get weapons on your characters immediately or they won't ever do damage and you're not going to win the game. Eventually your opponent will just draw outs to your defense because things like Pierce exist. The bigger they are exist. Burn damage exists. Like, you can't dawdle around with this deck. You don't have time to take 10 turns, make all your tanks gods, and then just sit there and laugh at your opponent because they can't do anything for a game. That doesn't happen. Like, while you're trying to set your tanks up, and your tanks are getting blown up while you're trying to set them up. There's just no time to spend your one upgrade a turn playing a databank. It's just not optimal. If Hunker Down could grab utilities from the scrap pile, this would be a whole different world, but it's too slow. It's just too slow, in my opinion. I tried it for a long time because I liked the idea of just being able to infinitely Darkmount all game and burn people, but it wasn't realistic. And that's kind of everything I want to talk about as far as cards being in this deck. As far as how good this deck is, like I said, it's very decent. I think this is the most, like, my friend and I have talked a lot that this is probably the most balanced deck in the game. Nothing you're ever doing in this deck feels unfair. You have to work for everything in the deck. If you don't draw well, you crumble. If you draw well and play things in the correct order, attack in the correct order, it can be very rewarding. I think this deck's a lot of fun. Hunker Down is probably one of the most fun cards playing the game. Just going like triple flip, triple upgrade, draw 3, pitch, burn scrap. Like, it's freaking crazy. You brainstorm into and do it's a really fun deck. Scrapping the things and then like toolboxing your scrap pile like that is really fun. I like a lot of things about this deck. I like defending in this deck. It's really fun. The main issue with this deck is it's in an awkward middle ground between aggressive and defensive. So it's not as good against the aggressive decks because they don't care about you trying to play a long game. Oh, you're defending. Yeah, you're defending their big attacks to the best of your ability. But if you're only dealing 3 or 4 damage a turn, eventually, again, they're just good to draw outs. So aggro decks usually come out on top over this deck, unless you just draw like a god and get your tank set up, and then you just body them. But again, not realistic. And then when it comes to fighting defensive decks, this deck seems like it'd be good because it has so much defense. So static buffs don't really get to it, and then it has so much Pierce. So you're just like, I don't even care that you're an all blue deck. Pierce. But against the main problem about this deck being the good defensive deck right now, because it beats the other defensive decks, is it does not beat the other defensive decks. Because we have things like double primes, Nemesis and Optimus builds in general. The main thing about those characters is they have really high health pools. So even though you're like, oh, Pierce 3, Pierce 4 every turn, you know, eventually in 5 turns, your Nemesis Prime will be dead. They're like, cool, attack for 13 with Nemesis Prime. And you're like, tough 2, defend for 6. Oh, cool, still take, like, the majority of it. Flip Optimus, grab 1 shot, stand 1 shot, fall. He gone. Optimus, 1 shot, flip, attack Demolisher, leap and battle. He gone. Like, they just kind of get one shot really quickly. Like, those big characters are just too fast because if you don't get your armors on, your tanks actually get one shots. Like, if your character's getting one shot anyway by the defensive decks, you might as well just play the aggro deck. So that's kind of the problem with this deck right now. It could get a lot of things that are better than this. Hunker Down has like infinite room to get better as a card. Blue already has like a lot of good cards in general, so it's on the right side of things to be good. Darkmount is an extremely good card. Darkmount with the right support could be literally one of the best characters in the game. Demolisher is pretty weak. If we get a replacement for Demolisher, could help the deck a lot. Megatron isn't bad, but I think Megatron forces us to cater to the Pierce playstyle, which ultimately is not the best way to go for the deck, in my opinion. If they give it cards to go in a different way, it could be a lot better. That's really all I have to say about tanks. This was kind of like not like a negative profile, but more like a realistic, like this deck's balanced. This deck's balanced. Like, that's what I'm here to tell you. This deck is really balanced. But I do think it's a lot of fun, and I would like to see where this deck goes in the future. And I'm probably gonna do more content with this deck because it's actually probably one of my favorite decks I've tested so far, aside from like Shockwave, all my Shockwave decks. I like the Shockwave Darkmount, deck a lot. But this one. This is a really fun deck, and I'd like to see where it goes. Wave 2, give us Warpath, please. Anyway, thanks guys for watching. I'll see you guys next time, and look forward to probably some more not tank content coming soon. Sorry, I just only have so much time to play test and record, and I'm really trying to make this deck good. I wish this deck were better.